Hello and welcome everybody. Welcome back to Comedian MTG. My name is Ian. On this week's episode, we are breaking down the top 16 of Mox Masters May 2023. This is another cEDH tournament brought to you by the collaboration between Playing with Power and Eminence Gaming. I don't want to beat around the bush. We got a cool top 16 here. We got some decks that are classics. We got a lot of decks that I think are pretty unique, and at least two decks that I know have never been on this video before, or one of these videos, I should say. So really cool stuff, and we're just going to jump right into it. Make sure to hit like and subscribe if you like videos like this. The channel has been doing so well lately, and I have only you in the audience to thank, so thank you so much. And if you're feeling generous, check out patreon.com/comedianmtg. Without any further ado, let's jump right in. Here for a good time, which, man, I love the deck names getting punnier as time goes on. But we have a Tayam Luminous Enigma list. Tayam, as I mentioned a little bit, has been popping off more and more as of late. I actually, right before recording this video, just finished a deck tech with Pixel Store, one of the primer authors for Tayam, and we're going to have a deck tech on this list coming out next week. And I'm not going to jump into too much detail about this specific version of the deck because it's almost card for card, apart from a few special pieces here from the list that we will be talking about in next week's video. So I'm not going to go too crazy with it, but for those who don't know, Tayam is one of the most interesting stack decks in the format, as Pixel describes in the video next week. Basically, it's a deck that throws Inala and Winota together, and that's sort of the play patterns, which is an interesting interpretation, but basically you want to activate Tayam's ability a bunch and generate enough value that you're breaking parity on rule of law style effects, stopping your opponents from going off and storming off, while also generating a bunch of value with a bunch of counters, creatures, and recurring, insane pieces like, Ranger Captain of Eos over and over from the graveyard, setting up engines so that you can do broken stuff like that, or reoccurring your removal spells or things like that. So the deck is really good at just getting value after value after value, and then slowly taking over the game as you start to set up some engines. Some ones that are pretty interesting are the brand new Drana and Linvala. I've been playing it all weekend at MC Minneapolis, and this card is stupid. It is so good. It does so many things. It shuts off your opponent's creatures that are proactive. It turns itself into a mana dork. I did some crazy things over the weekend, like have it become a Spellskite and then use it for mana after making it a Ranger Captain, like crazy stuff like that. So Drana Lavala, great card here. I know White Plume Adventurer is not in the list that we're going to talk about next week on the channel, but it was mentioned as a tech piece. Really cool because at the game's end, you can actually loop White Plume Adventurer over and over again and use the initiative to actually kill your opponents, which is a pretty interesting loop there. And a bunch of cool stuff like that. The list is a list that just generates a bunch of value and then just turns that value into a win con. So really cool to see another tie-in performance. As I mentioned, one of the most underrated decks in the format, and I'm so excited that we are going to feature it on this channel next week. Seedborn Dudes. This is a Thrasios Dargo list by Steppen Razor. As I mentioned, Thrasios Dargo is really just showing up at these Mox Masters events. A deck that's performing over and over again. New pieces in here like Fairy Mastermind and Invasion of Ikoria. Those cards are showing up everywhere, and I watched Fairy Mastermind in Kinnan over the weekend. I was playing against Tyler from Playing with Power, and he showed off with this card. It did a lot of really impressive stuff. I think it drew like 4 cards naturally, and then it got to the board state where you had a Consecrated Sphinx and Fairy Mastermind out, and like that was obviously like every activation was drawing 7 cards at least. No, sorry, not only 7 cards, but then getting a trigger from each of the opponents. So like 10 cards. So definitely really cool. Fairy Mastermind, very cool card. Obviously with Consecrated Sphinx it's kind of busted, but like that's not the case every single time. But definitely it performed well this weekend from what I saw. And apart from that, this is the classic Thrasios Dargo thing, trying to do the Thrasios grindy, Seedborn Muse win plan, has combos with Dockside and Teamer Sabretooth, while also doing a bunch of crazy Dargo stuff, using cards like Birthing Pod to turn into a Tidespout Tyrant, also using Greater Good and into a Breach to usually just fill up your hand and then win with the deck. Relic of Legends being a huge upgrade to all of these Dargo decks because it just allows the combos to be super clean and concise. twice. This deck has been performing really, really well lately. I called it one of the sleepers of the format a little while ago, and I'm continually paid off for that call. I think it's a really, really solid deck. It does a lot of cool stuff that other Thrasios decks don't do, which kind of, carves out its own unique space as a Thrasios deck. Really cool stuff, and glad to see the performance from it, because I think it's a really cool list. Speed needs low translation from Memo. This is another iteration and performance by Memo with this deck. I've mentioned this a good amount at this point, but Memo has once again taken this Najeela turbo-focused ad nauseum list and put up good numbers with it. It is a proactive list, it is aggressive, and it goes and does the thing. You're playing 5 colors, you get some of the best cards from all the colors, you get 1-card combos with Derevi and Grim Hireling, and then you get to play Breach, you get to play ad nauseum, you get to play intuition piles, you get to just do some of the most efficient, clean stuff in the format while also having 1-card combos in the command zone and a commander that can just win the game on its own. Super solid deck, consistently doing well. Memo consistently doing well with this deck should tell you everything you need to know about the fact that the deck's just putting up numbers, and someone playing it over and over again and putting up results over and over again should be really indicative of the fact that the deck's just good. It's one of those decks that if you want to put up numbers in the format, probably a good place to start. Now we have a cEDH deck that is only good if it can opt for 4 by Toaster, which is I love the solid deck names lately. This is a Thrasios Bruce Tarl list that I'm pretty sure is just almost the primer list for Dawnwaker right now, with the only changes being that they are currently on Smothering Tithe and Fairy Mastermind, which and Endurance. So those are the changes from the primer list right now, and these are all changes that I have been testing with lately too. So really cool to see someone play Dawnwaker have these changes pay off. For those who don't know, Dawnwaker, infinite mana combo deck, trying to combo with Zerda plus your Basalt Monolith, Kinnan your Basalt Monolith. You're trying to combo off with Devoted Druid and Swift Reconfiguration, or a bunch of different Dockside combos, primarily with Emil. Infinite mana, Thrasios stuff. One of the best decks at just being the mid-range deck of the format. I am, so proud to have been worked on this deck. Oh, Snap's another interesting piece. And I'm loving that people are picking it up recently. I've been, hyping it up for a long time. Obviously, my own deck, right? And I'm going to be talking about it more, but, I've been genuinely thinking that the deck's been in a really solid place, and people have been taking it, not myself, and putting up just good numbers over and over again. And I've seen a lot of good players play it really well. It's just being one of the most consistent mid-range pairings in the format and putting up good numbers. Dockside is a hell of a drug, and Thrasios definitely is one of the best outlets in the format. So, nice performance by this player, and solid deck name. Super funny stuff. Love it. Next we have the first performance I've ever seen from this commander. This is Safis Daughter by Nilstan, Safi Boonhulk Primer. And Nilstan is actually a member of the Community and MTG Discord, so I have been seeing them talk about this deck a good amount for the past couple months, and very excited to see them come out here and put up numbers with this deck, top 16, right away. It's a really cool list, a list that I really enjoyed as soon as I saw Nilstan talk about it, because Safi is one of those commanders I've thought for a really long time, and I was just like, oh, there's no way that this deck is not very good at just comboing so easily. And basically the idea is that you get cards on the battlefield like Boomweaver Giant or Sun Titan, something like that, and a sack outlet, and then you just start popping off with your Safi. So for example, if you have a sack outlet, much like Altar of Dementia, right, you can have your Safi, and then you have something like a Renegade Rallier, and you play your Safi, sack it to say Renegade Rallier comes back. If it gets sacrificed, sacrifices to an Altar Dementia, mill your opponents. Renegade Rallier comes back on the battlefield because of Safi's ability, and then Rallier brings back Safi. And then, as you're noticing here, that's a loop. One of the reasons I think Safi is solid is because it just does that loop so easily. It is very, very easy to assemble these loops, and very easy to just put these combos online. So the ability for you to, either have your Boom Weaver combos, sacrificing your Academy Rectors to get your combos going, and then just get your Safi on the battlefield and combo super easily. Nice layered combos that can also break parity on things like Rule of Law effects, means that the deck is just kind of clean. It does what it does. It obviously gets hit pretty hard by Graveyard Hate. It gets pretty hard by like Curse Totem style effects. But apart from that, it is just is a solid, redundant combo deck, and I'm very happy to see that Nilstan made top 16 with this deck because, as I mentioned, I thought it was super cool and was a shame that it wasn't, consistently performing. But here we have a solid performance from the deck. So congrats, Nilstan. The deck's pretty sweet, and love to see it doing well here. We have Fool's Gold by Sharky. This is Sharky who, as we mentioned a little while ago, was tearing it up with this Tevesh Crom list. Did was like 2 top 16s in a row, or was a top 16, a top 4, and winning a whole tournament with this deck, and it was mostly in the Chaos series. But Tevesh Crom, Sharky's specialty here, just putting up numbers over and over again, doing sort of this classic mid-range Turbo Nas thing, opting to have the larger engines in the command zone, Tevesh instead of Timna, right, instead of the classic blue farm thing, but Tevesh giving you a few different things like Hullbreaker Horror to be able to combo off instead of some other pieces. Interested to see Malevolent Hermit in this deck. It's sort of a counterspell, it's sort of a combo off for free thing if you can get it in the graveyard and recast it. Displacer Kitten obviously being one of the main reasons to play this different variant, is you get Kitten out, you get your commander out, and then suddenly every other card is drawing you to, which is pretty solid. And technically speaking, I guess it's like every time you flicker it, you can, for every 3 activations, you draw 4 cards, and that is a really quick way to start storming off. As many of you know, Displacer Kitten's already a card that I am a giant fan of, so being able to see it do well in this is pretty solid. And then you have this, just insane amount of card draw in the command zone. You have Narset here to be able to break parity on all the wheel effects you're playing, which is 3 of them here. You have, Mnemonic Trail as a Graveyard win condition. You have your Thassa's Oracle combos here. The deck's just a really solid Grixis mid-range deck with some really top-end commanders that are just meant to be, hey, here's a large source of mana in my command zone. I'm going to draw a ton of cards and outvalue my opponents and do the regular classic intense Grixis stuff in the meantime. So congrats to Sharky for continually putting up results with this deck, and I'm interested to see if some other pilots can pick it up because it seems to be pretty underrated at the moment. This is Rockside Storm combo, duplicated from the Epic Storm by WTF It's Not Butter. Butter has put up a couple results in these Mox Masters tournaments, but there's not much to say about this one other than it's the same 24 land Rockside list that's been doing pretty decently lately. Rockside is just doing really well. It's in a really solid spot. There's been a lot of work put into it by a number of pilots in the format. Specifically, I know the Epic Storm, Bryant Cook is doing a lot of work with this deck. It's performing really well, and a number of different pilots have done well with it. We've had people like Alana, we've had Bryant himself, we have a number of people doing well with this list. 24 land, very fast, Rogsai. It's one of those decks that, people let it happen, right? It is a deck that is going to put up consistent results if you have a competent enough pilot who knows how to storm. And it looks like people are doing it, so congrats to WTF It's Not Butter for doing well with this deck. We have Sans Blue Hulk by Disco Breaker. I love to see a good Protean Hulk list here. We have a deck featuring my boy Kiki Jiki, upside down, but you know how it is. Love to see it. This is a no black Protean Hulk list, no blue Protean Hulk list. Trying to do Kiki Felidar stuff, get a Protean Hulk onto the battlefield, sacrifice it, get an Arena Rector on the battlefield, sacrifice it to get a Pattern Rebirth, to get your Protean Hulk. All the classic stuff. Also, able to play Birthing Pod lines to go up from your commander, to be able to have Timna go all the way up to a Kiki Jiki combo. I'm a little surprised to not see Vivian and Arena Rector in this list, because you're already playing this entire Protean Hulk line. You're already playing sack outlets for the Academy Rector, and you're playing Timna in the command zone. So to me, it feels a little bit free to be able to play the Vivian lines to win the game, and I'm a little surprised to not see that, to be honest. Definitely interested to hear from the pilot of this list why that isn't in the deck, because to me, instinctually, that would jump out as like, oh yeah, it's an auto-include here. But yeah, apart from that, this is a classic Protean Hulk deck in Sans Blue. Just trying to basically be the creature combo deck of the format a little bit, and use the fact that you have Timna in the command zone, generate a bunch of card advantage, and then also have some cool dockside lines and things like that to be able to go off of Mayhem Devil, things like that. Kiki Jiki combo, creature combos are hard to interact with, and this deck takes advantage of that really, really well. Activated Sleeper was a great upgrade for these archetypes, and just there's a lot of good stuff from this archetype. So congrats to our pilot here for making the top 16 with it. Phyrexia Finds a Way by Mastermind. Now this is my favorite deck in this tournament. It's a top 16 Atali Primal Conqueror list. This is the new Atali. It is a food chain outlet, is an infinite mana outlet with Dockside, and it's just a big old dinosaur, and I love it. And a one-hit kill machine on the backside. It's so cool. This deck is super, super spicy. I don't know. I get so happy when I see a deck like this. It's so cool. But, you're trying to do the classic Dockside thing. You have some Magda lines here to be able to go Magda Curio. I'm assuming, yeah, Cloudstone Curio in here. You have cards like Conqueror's Flail as your version of your defense grids in this deck, outside apart from defense grid. You have Food Chain to be able to go Food Chain and Squee. No Eternal Scourge in the list, but, just a quick way to get a bunch of value. Yeah, this is so cool. Reckless Fireweaver, I'm assuming, is in the list as sort of like the outlet to actually win the game in the deck, which is a little interesting to me. I wouldn't particularly think that's where the deck would want to go, but curious about that inclusion in particular. Playing Magus of the Moon, and they also playing Blood Moon. Let's take a look here. Yeah, Blood Moon, to be able to prepared in the fact that you're playing two colors, and two colors that are very flexible with mana. A lot of mana sources in this deck. You see rituals, you see mana dorks, you see artifacts, a lot of different ways to be able to say, hey, I have a 7 mana commander, let's pump it up. Return to Nature, a card I've literally never seen actually see play in cEDH. Nature's Claim on top of that. So there's a lot of instance for a deck that is not playing blue. And playing Ruination, a card that I love seeing play. This is so cool. This is the kind of deck that makes me geek out really hard because it's so cool. The Mezio Mugger also here, very interesting because it's not one that I was really expecting to see. I know it's been playing in Animar as of recently, but didn't expect it to be here. We also have Blank Goblin, which is one of those cards that I know people have explained why it's really, really good, but learning how to play it correctly is very complicated, and I haven't quite done it yet. That doesn't mean I shouldn't do it, it just means it is complicated. But very interested to see more people picking this up. I know it's mostly been a Godo staple since its printing, but cool to see it played in another list here. But yeah, this is just super, super solid. I love the fact that we have this brand new commander who I'm pretty sure someone commented like immediately on my my breakdown of March of Machine that this deck would never see play because it's just a bad food chain outlet, and love seeing the immediate no, actually here it is, top 16ing the first Mox Masters since it's printing, and it might just be a flavor of the month commander, but this is so cool. Like I'm kind of geeking out pretty hard. The fact that we get to see this and this commander, I mean, it does, if you ever get to the 7 mana to play it, it gets you 4 free cards, right? And like that alone is something. But yeah, it's all like Primal Conqueror, so badass. I mean, this is great. Like it's so cool. We have Kodama by Outowhack, which is another name I believe I have mentioned before in these breakdowns, but this is Sakashima Kodama, which is a deck that I genuinely thought was a flavor of the month deck that people were never going to pick up again. For those who don't know, the whole point is to have Kodama and then have Sakashima come down as a second Kodama, and usually with the way that works, you can win by having both your commanders and certain cards in your hand. The idea is basically that you get a ton of free value by dropping, as you notice, some real big creatures into the field after you have a second Sakashima, or you have Sakashima come in as a second Kodama. There are a lot of different ways to be able to pop off while you have it. There's some crazy stuff with like trade routes and like bouncing lands and things like that, because the way the commander works, you can like, with 2 Kodamas, you can play lands, bounce stuff, and then like do a bunch of crazy ways to like generate infinite mana, and then put it into cards like Staff of Domination. You can go infinite with Coveted Jewel, which is not a card that most people look at. You can go infinite with Cloudstone Curio stuff. It does a lot of, it's one of those things where it's like, if your 10 mana combined commanders are allowed to happen, you usually have a very solid chance of winning the game with a competent pilot. Really cool to see it happen. As I mentioned, I really thought this was a flavor of the month card back when Commander Legends was printed, but here we have this deck putting up a top 16. One of the things it's really, really good at, and I think probably was really advantageous in this tournament, is that it's very good at breaking parity on stacks decks. And it's very interesting because the way the abilities work, it doesn't, like, you can combo off without casting stuff, right? So there's a lot of times in this list where you cast one spell and win the game, so you can literally storm off in a Rule of Law, which is super cool. Also worth mentioning here, another Fairy Mastermind battle or Invasion of Ikoria, appearance. Cool stuff. Glad to see it doing well here. But yeah, deck is sweet. And, once again, congratulations to this pilot, because it was a deck that I completely had forgotten about and had sort of just written off as like a flavor of the month type of thing. Also worth noting, Moloku plus your commander goes infinite. You can make infinite 1/1s because even with just Kodama, because what happens is you activate the ability, you create a 1/1 blue illusion, and Kodama says, oh, hey, you can actually put a 0-drop in from your hand. So you put a land in, tap it for the 1 mana to activate the ability of Moloku, and that makes infinite 1/1s without even needing a second Kodama. So that's something worth mentioning in this deck too. But cool stuff. Congrats to Adowak for taking a dead deck to the top 16. We have another example of if you specialize in a deck, you're going to do well with it. We have Shauna here with her Primal Niv deck, repeatedly doing very, very well with this list. We have Niv Mizzet, we have Dockside Extortionist getting you your Niv. We have the Jeweled Lotus in the deck getting you your Niv Mizzet. You're playing control pieces like Grafdigger's Cage and Counterbalance, and then you have your Curiosity, your Ophidian Eye, and I believe your Tandem Lookout. Just as these 1-card win conditions for your super powerful commander in the command zone. I love this deck. I played it like right when it first came out. Shauna's put in a ton of work in this archetype and clearly paying off. A deck, like, if you know your control deck well enough, turns out you can do really, really well with it. So congrats to Shauna for continually putting up results with a deck that, not everybody sees as a solid contender in the format, but clearly we have a specialist here playing a deck that she's known for doing very well with it. Nice job. I love this name because this is I am bad for not playing Dockside by punny name. Just awesome names there. But playing Attraxa Grand Unifier, we saw Christopher K. Claw put up 2 top 16s and then a win with this Attraxa list. It's a little bit different than Christopher's most recent list, but punny name here, going in and putting up a result with this deck, which is so funny because every time I'm goldfishing this Attraxa list, not this one in particular, but Attraxa in general, I'm always thinking to myself, man, I just want a Dockside for this deck. And it's so funny that the name of this list is literally basically an allusion to that dichotomy. But this is Attraxa, and Attraxa's been putting up more and more results. I literally have on my desk right now these Attraxa sleeves with an Attraxa in them, ready to be sleeved up, and I just haven't done it yet. Just so funny because I keep being so close to sleeving up Attraxa. I love this commander. It is one of the cards that has like stimulated my brewing brain since its printing. I love it as a reanimation target. I love it in the command zone. It's just a card I haven't gotten a lot of chances to actually play and sleeve up yet. And a lot of the deck does sort of look like 4-color good stuff, but you get to play some really cool things like Displacer Kitten, which is a card we all know I am absolutely obsessed with. And you get to play this one I really like because this one's playing Mist Hologriffin instead of Eternal Scourge, which, there's a lot of argument either way, but I've always said being able to Force of Will your Mist Hologriffin with exiling that card and then using that for food chain later is always my favorite interaction for food chain decks. So that's my preference. I know Eternal Scourge is cheaper, and there are going to be games where that pays off, but I like Mist Hollow. I also like playing both as an option, but that's not everyone's, it sucks for card quality, right? But and also probably is better if you are focusing on playing Mist Hologriffin as your if you're playing Food Chain as your main way to win the game. But this deck is trying to play Attraxa once usually and try and win the game. We have Displacer Kitten to Fairy stuff, but Displacer Kitten plus Attraxa is just like GG's. You win the game at that point. Even like Phantasmal Imaging too, right? 2 mana, get another Attraxa, draw another 10 cards, or not draw 10 cards per se, but like look at 10 cards to draw. Surprised it's not playing Invasion of Ikoria just because it's another card type to be able to grab and the card's stupid good. But yeah, this is... Apart from like the the classic Attraxa stuff, it is definitely like a mid-range creature deck. Playing cards like Imposter Mech just as like another Dockside copy. Playing Smothering Tide to be able to get you a bunch of mana to be able to do your thing, and a ton of different ramp pieces. Playing Food Chain as a win con. If you infinitely cast your Food Chain, you can cast your commander out of your command zone over and over again. It's definitely one of those Food Chain decks where you cannot really afford to exile too much of your library, because Attraxa will just pull you into a win con. Playing Thassa's Oracle Consultation Lions, playing, some of the best blue, black, white creatures, especially Grand Abolisher and Ranger Captain of EO. So, really posing the question of like, is Timna Thrasios better for being better cards in the command zone, or is Attraxa better for opening up to more win conditions in the command zone? It's hard to say, but Attraxa has been putting up results over and over again, and that just might be because it's newer, it's more attractive to people, or it might be the fact that the deck's actually got some real legs to it, and a 7/7 that draws you 7 cards in the command zone doesn't suck for sure. So interested to see if this deck keeps putting up results. I know for a fact I'm gonna sleeve up a version and try it, because I just like the card. It's a really cool card. Now we're into our top 4, and showing up here with a really interesting Kinnan list. It's sort of, to me, reminiscent of Tyler's list because of the lines with Perplexing Chimera and a lot of the work that Matt Sperling has done with the list with cards like Ancestral Dragon. But it is this, big mana Kinnan deck that has just been doing really well lately. As many of you know, it's a deck that I've really, really enjoyed playing a lot of. My list definitely has its differences from this one, but also, there's been a bunch of performances from Kinnan lately, and it's a deck that's doing really, really well. A lot more people are picking up the list. Classic outlets here with Basalt Monolith and Mirage Mirror. We have Energy Refractor as one of the payoff, being able to use it as a way to convert your mana into colored mana, and also just being a cantrip on the front end. A lot of cool stuff here. Steel Enchantment is an interesting piece of tech that I've heard people talking about, which is really funny, because like, it was considered like a really good piece like in 2016, I think, last time people were playing this card. And now I think, I've heard from a lot of people that Ristic and Mystic are just like, I mulligan to these cards. So, I guess if we're at that point again, Steel Enchantment might just be worth picking up, and people are just, saying, yeah, your Mystic Remora is really good, I want it. Cool stuff like that. Apart from that, this is just a big mana Kinnan deck doing the big mana Kinnan stuff, generating a bunch of value, and flipping over into big stuff to win the game. We have Freedom Waffle here with Dargo Thrasios midrange. This is another one of these Dargo Thrasios decks like we talked about earlier in Freedom. Person who won and knocked me out of the top 4 when I was playing Kinnan with this deck. Freedom's been putting up really good results with this list. Their version playing Displacer Kitten and Bergie for a few more, or I guess Bergie was playing the other version, but Displacer Kitten specifically, which was how they actually won our finals match, and they just went like Dockside Displacer Kitten combo off in our game. But not a lot of changes from the last time we featured this deck, but the whole point is stuff like we talked about earlier. Greater Good with Dargo is bonkers. Underworld Breach in a deck where you can dump a ton of cards in the graveyard's great. Phyrexian Altar here as another way to like pay off to have Dargo recast over and over again, and then if you have a card like Savala onto the battlefield, you'll be able to draw your entire deck, although Savala doesn't seem to be in this version, so you need a card like Bergie to be able to start netting infinite mana with a bunch of Phyrexian Altar recasts. And yeah, it's a lot of stuff like that. The deck is super solid at doing what it does. It's a really good list, and yeah, very cool stuff. Very powerful list. Dargo Thrasios, a deck I really enjoy, and I'm glad to see it doing well over and over again. We have Rockside by Goblin Fort. This is, from what I can tell, just another one of these Brian Cook Rockside lists. It is pretty solid. The deck does its thing. We talked about it earlier, right? Not too much to really say about this archetype apart from the fact that it's one of the best decks in the format. It's definitely the fastest deck in the format, and it does its thing really, really well. It plays 24 lands because you have Rog in the command zone to be able to turbo your stuff out as quickly as possible. You're playing some of the best win conditions in the format. You're playing Thoracle Breach. You're playing, under ad nauseum, just doing its thing over and over again, consistently doing really well in the format. Rogside's in a really solid place, and people are starting to do really well with it. It's a deck people have to respect, and what happens is sometimes, people slip for 2 seconds and the deck wins. It's a deck you really have to respect. It's a deck you really have to realize, like, sometimes you think it's out of the game, and then it catches a wheel, and everybody wheels, and the game's completely different, and the landscape is so different. And some people, keep early hands that are kind of greedy and don't have the interaction you need, and suddenly the Rockside deck is doing an ad nauseum on turn 2, right? So it's a deck you can't let do stuff. And if you let it do stuff, it's going to end up in the top 4, in the top 16. It can be disrupted if you hit it with a good amount of pieces, but, it does require the respect of being one of the best decks in the format. Now we have our winning deck, T&J Nozless by Gary the Wizard. We have Jessica and Timna. This is, as it mentioned in the deck list description, is an ad nauseum-less Timna Jessica deck, which is not something often associated with this archetype. But we have Bolus's Citadel here as one of the payoffs in the deck. We have Peer into the Abyss here as a payoff in the deck, but no ad nauseum because it is a graveyard version of Timna and Jessica. Playing World Gorger Dragon Lines, being able to go infinite and pump your infinite mana into your Jessica. Playing the new Hordling Broodlord combos, which I'm so excited to actually see played because I've been hyping up this combo, and especially when we talked about March of the Machine. It's awesome. So you get your Hordling Broodlord on the battlefield. For anyone who doesn't know, you tap the Broodlord to saw in half. So you need to get your Broodlord on the battlefield and have 2 generic mana or 2 more creatures to tap, basically. You saw in half your Broodlord. You get 2 Broodlords. You get either a Burnt Offering or a Sacrifice, but it looks like this list is only playing Burnt Offering. Very interesting. No Sacrifice here. And then you get a Peer into the Abyss, and you can sacrifice your Broodlord, cast a Peer into the Abyss, and if you can't win the game after casting a Peer into the Abyss with mana floating after that, that might be a deck construction issue. But yeah, the deck's super cool. I love seeing an evolution on an archetype that was already pretty solid, right? We have T&J being a deck that had put up a few results as of recently, and now we have it being this version of the deck playing the new spice of the Broodlord, playing some really interesting cards and moving away from ad nauseum just due to the fact that the deck is a really high curve, right? Like, let's check the converted mana cost here. The list, it's average mana of the main deck is 1.42, so with the Naz that would probably go up even more. And instead of hoping for some bad ad nauseums, playing into the graveyard style of this archetype. I've always thought T&J was a little bit more mid-rangey as it was anyways, so moving away from being maybe like a slightly worse turbo deck to being this reanimator mid-range deck with 2 amazing commanders in the command zone. It's really hard to argue that Jessica is not super strong, and Timna obviously is the best commander in the format, arguably, maybe next to Najila or Rockside. Timna is just insane. I think it's pretty easy to argue Timna is the best commander in the format, so having that in combination with some really solid pieces here, some classic farm style deck, just without the ad nause and with these crazy payoffs. So congrats to this pilot. I know there's also a little bit of controversy with this top 4, as there was a player with a revealed Mindbreak Trap who was trying to priority bully into countering this Grand Abolisher. And the player in 4th had audibly said, hey, I am not going to let you priority bully me. If you pass to me, I'm going to let the Grand Abolisher resolve. I know you have a Mindbreak Trap. It's online. It stops us from losing the game here. The player with the Mindbreak Trap passed priority, and the player in 4th said, hey, this is how I feel about this. You heard my words. I'm a person of my word. I told you I would not counter it if you pass priority and tried to get greedy here, and they let the Grand Abolisher resolve. So the finals match of this tournament ended with a political game. It ended with somebody trying to abuse the priority system in a sense, and they got punished for it, which is really interesting. To be honest, I think that's kind of cool. I respect the heck out of the player in 4th for saying, I'm going to stick to my word. I think it's what you want to see out of the format, right? In what your opinion on this matter will be is what your opinion on what you want to see out of cEDH. If you think, it's very interesting. I think the player went for a greedy line, got punished for it. This is the reason why I don't go too hard into priority bullying, especially when there's revealed information. And you know what? They lost out at a chance for a much higher prize pool because they got greedy. And at least for me, I think that's pretty crazy, and definitely an interesting way for a tournament to end. I mean, that's not even like a Swiss round. This is the finals of a major cEDH tournament ending by a player getting punished for going greedy. So wild stuff. I was very interested to hear that is how the tournament ended, and very, very cool way to end it, as I mentioned, a top 4 for this tournament. I'm super interested to hear what people's thoughts are on this matter in the comments below, because this is, I don't know that there's been a more controversial ending to a tournament, as opposed to, as far as the gameplay itself is concerned. This is like the weirdest way that a tournament has ever ended, and to happen in the finals match. I mean, maybe like the turn 2 pop off through multiple pieces of interaction in my finals against Freedom Waffle was also pretty impactful. But these Mox Masters events are having some wild finals events, and you know, the player once again getting punished for trying to go greedy and abuse the priority system is crazy way to end a tournament. So I really want to hear from people down below. What do you think of that? Like, that's, yeah, I don't know. I feel like I've said the same thing a couple times, but it's I never expected to hear about something like that. But also, I'm really glad that a list that is innovating on an old archetype, or old by, you know, Commander Legends old, I guess, but an iteration on an existing archetype being able to be rewarded through some gameplay and winning with some cool Hordling Broodlord combos is awesome. But what do you think? Would you have countered the spell while being priority bullied? Would you even have mentioned, if you know you've revealed Mindbreak Trap, the idea that you're going to pass priority to your opponents? I'd love to hear what people think in the comments down below. Thank you all for watching this top 4 breakdown. I love doing stuff like this. You know, it's the main thing that this channel cuts its teeth on. I love cEDH. I love cEDH tournaments, and I love seeing results from these tournaments. If you enjoy content like this, please make sure to hit like and subscribe. We've got crazy stuff coming. There's so many cool decks in this tournament and a lot of wild stuff that happened in it. So love to break down tournaments like this and get the idea of what's on the scoop for these tournaments. Also, if you want to check out, as I mentioned at the start of this video, patreon.com/communitymtg helps out the channel a ton. Coming up in June, we have a lot of really crazy good stuff for this channel. I am taking the entire summer off to focus on my content, to be able to try and give you multiple videos a week, shorts, stuff like that. And hopefully to be able to put out enough content to make this something I can give you all on a really, really consistent basis. We've been going weekly for months, but I really want this to be something that people can enjoy multiple times a week and maybe even more. So if that is a project you would like to support, if you want to support me also adding more to the coaching tier, hopefully by the time summer comes around, I'll be expanding that to 10 slots for the coaching tier of our Patreon. If these are things that are interesting to you, please go over to patreon.com/communitymtg. You can also contact me separately if you want to do a one-time coaching session through either Google or Patreon, you can, or Gmail or Twitter, any of those public places, Discord as well. Feel free to hit me up if you're interested in cEDH coaching. Without any further ado, thank you all for watching this video. Huge shout out to our affiliate Dragonshield, who provides us amazing sleeves, and it's the sleeves that I use to sleeve all my cEDH decks. Check out Dragonshield with the affiliate link down below if you want to get some good deals on Dragonshield sleeves and help out the channel at the same time. Also, a reminder, I'm an ambassador for Monarch Media, the tournament group that, you know, basically started tournaments for cEDH. They have some cool projects coming up ahead, and as soon as I can announce those, I definitely will be. But they're a group I'm really excited to see pop off after taking a small break. They've got some cool stuff coming up, and as soon as I have dates for those, I'll let you all know. Thank you so much for watching this channel. Really appreciate it. Hope you all have an amazing week. Peace.
I can feel the blood creeping up from the heathens. Got will, got fight, got pride, got reason. If they wanna go eat, then you know I'm gonna feed them. If you're coming for me, hope you're ready for a demon. I got eyes in the back of my head, I'm seeing. Take me for granted and you know I'm leaving. I'ma take what's mine with the webs I'm weaving. I could take this crowd from seeing to believing.